Finally, as part of my undergraduate studies, I was required to take an ethnomusicology course. In my case, it was an independent study on a topic of my choosing. When determining which culture I would like to study, I was torn between studying Japan or music of the Amazon basin. Ultimately, I decided to study music of the Amazon, in part so I could continue my studies of Latin jazz, one of my favorite genres. My main area of interest was bossa nova, and I spent countless hours listening to the likes of Joao Gilberto, Antonio Carlos Jobim, Nara Leao, Stan Getz, and more. I found the roots of bossa nova terribly interesting. I always enjoyed the chamber music quality of bossa nova, and discovered that that sound was a direct result of a small group of people in Rio de Janeiro that practiced and held soirees almost exclusively in apartment buildings. Part of the bossa nova movement was a transition away from the loud and raucous samba dance bands of the early 20th century into small chamber-sized ensembles with a laid-back groove, more akin to West Coast jazz of the 1950s and 60s. From 1945 to 1964, Brazil had a burgeoning democracy, coupled with economic growth. These years of ease may have allowed for such art forms as bossa nova to flourish. These good times would not last. A military dictatorship would reign in Brazil for the next 20 years.
Se aperto o botão, meu coração vai me dizer que é samba sim. Máquina de ritmo, processo de algoritmos padrões.
Latin music relies heavily on rhythmic ostinatos. A lot of samba, salsa, and bossa nova pieces are centered around these rhythmic cells, some of which are typically designated to a certain instrument. For instance, the clave is both an instrument and is typically associated with a two-measure rhythmic cell, the son clave. Another example is the cascara.
Não sei não, assim eu acabo me entregando, pois está fazendo ano e meio, amor.
While I was listening to these shakers, clackers, and whistles, I asked myself, these rhythmic elements sound just like the sounds one would find in nature. Birds, insects, frogs, water. Is this merely a coincidence? Or are these sounds imitating specific animal sounds of South America? Unsurprisingly, I found that, yes, these are emulations of regional fauna. The peoples of the Amazon have undoubtedly been creating instruments which mimic their surroundings for millenniums, many of which can still be found in indigenous and popular music today. I studied a few different aspects of indigenous Amazon music: melodic material, instrumentation, song texts, and shamanism. The music we will be hearing is primarily pentatonic or modal. Remember, we discussed modes in our conversation about Renaissance music. As important as the actual notes are, I can't imagine them being anywhere as important as the situational circumstances or the timbral affectations associated with a given performance.
What do I mean by that?
Simply put,
we cannot separate the musical characteristics from the importance of shamanistic practices in the Amazon.
As Ramon and Rivera state in their article,
Indigenous Music of Venezuela, regarding indigenous music of Venezuela,
quote, music continues to be linked to myths,
which in turn set up the oral history of the origins, and to a ritual which repeats annually parts of the original myth. Hence, it is not pure music, but a cultural complex, which includes text, sound, dance, and drama based on oral tradition. In addition to shamanistic songs, I found texts about nuptials,
mourning, hunting, war, harvest, coming-of-age songs,
and songs which act as allegory or of warning. The peoples of the Amazon use a wide array of instruments. Idiophones, membranophones, aerophones,
and chordophones. As you may imagine, these instruments are made from wood, stone, bone, turtle shell, and other organic matter. While I was listening to old field recordings of this music, I could hear bird calls and insects bleed into the recording, and I was reminded of an anecdote.
Charles Mingus.
Y'all better hope that girl don't kill me under the mall. What's not wrong?
Band leader, bassist, and composer
Was warming up on stage at a little jazz club.
The bartender shut off the electric fan to cut down on the noise.
Charles Mingus, known to be somewhat of a hothead, jumped over the counter, threw the bartender up against the wall, and said, "Hey, I was using that." We often, purposefully or not, incorporate our surroundings into our performances or ceremonies.
If not physically or orally, then at the very least emotionally. This would certainly be true in a forest teeming with life.
My initial building block was the use of the bossa nova rhythm I spoke about.
I took this bossa nova rhythm here and placed it in these low drums here and in the clave.
I once read that the clave starts the piece like a starter's pistol and does not let up until the piece concludes. I ran with this idea.
And through the use of augmentation, I built the structure and form of this piece around this persistent rhythm.
One of my takeaways is that I will never truly be able to understand the peoples of the Amazon, or even the peoples of Brazil. People dedicate their entire lives to such endeavors.
But what I can connect with them on is a love for and a wholehearted respect of nature, generally universal within indigenous cultures. This appreciation for nature is what I used as my jumping off point for my compositional approach. I am an avid field recordist, and I utilized a bird call I recorded on the bluffs outside Denver, Colorado. I have not been able to track down what type of bird it is, possibly something in the finch family, but it sounds like this. Let's take a listen to the opening of the piece, listening for the bossa nova rhythm in the clave and the bird call.
Who should decide the future of the Amazon? The future of our people?
The last piece of the puzzle was simply implementing all of my prior film scoring knowledge to aid with timings, pacing, orchestration, sound design, and mixing. It just so happened that I had this film in my collection, Who Should Decide, provided by the Music Cosmos Film Scoring Competition 2021. Previously, I chose not to score this film because I did not think I could do it justice without doing the proper research. My ethnomusicology class provided an opportunity for me to do this research.
And I thought who should decide would be a good project to implement what I had learned.
Who should decide the future of the Amazon? The future of our people? Of our languages? Of the jaguars and the anaconda? Of the spirits living within our lands? Should the loggers get to decide the fate of our forests? Should the oil executives decide the future of our rivers? We've been protecting our sacred lands for thousands of years, so that our children and your children may live on a healthy planet. Today, we are fighting for our right to protect a forest that gives us all life. Our battle is about who should decide the future of our forest homelands. Those who destroy it, or those who protect it? Join us.
Thanks for taking the time to hang out and join me along this musical journey that I experienced at Western Oregon University. You can see I took my father's advice and worked on a vast array of projects and genres, and I believe I am a better man and composer for it. If you are interested in this style of composition, or this process of composition, my main point of advice would be this: don't be in a rush. For each of these topics we discussed, I spent anywhere from 3 to 12 months researching and score studying. Thank you again, and take care.